At 70, Alf Mason is now retired, but he was a freelance cameraman for about 20 years, covering events in the Narrabri area for the ABC and the commercial networks. The way information is transmitted around the world has vastly changed since Alf started in the business. In the early days, he would send his news film by train to the TV stations, which often took up to several days.
But if I was in a hurry, I would go out to the level crossing at Narrabri West and wait for someone going there with a sign, urgent news film.
Alf started his career taking still photos with a box camera, and his interest in them didn't wane. This bowerbird has collected about 300 cameras. Alf hopes to display his collection at a museum. Some interest has been shown by the Curtis collection at Foster.
Newcastle is the first stop in the series of lectures aimed at helping people who work voluntarily for the environment, such as local councillors, students and resident groups, to better understand environmental law.
To let citizens know what environmental law can do to better protect the environment, so that they can participate in decision making.
Mr Robinson believes people don't fully understand how great an impact they can have on what's happening in their own community.
There are sometimes times where the regulatory authorities, the local councils, the environmental protection authorities don't take action, and the citizens can be a catalyst for action.
Environmental law covers many issues, including landfill sites, the preservation of wetlands and pollution from industry.
The contaminated land problems, the pollution problems resulting from the century of use of the smelter.
The message is, if there's something occurring in the environment that concerns citizens, they shouldn't be afraid to speak out. Through the workshops, it's hoped people will understand the legal path to take and the relevant government bodies available to them when action must be taken. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The two-day pilot course at Armidale's Traffic Education Centre was aimed at improving attitudes to road behaviour as well as driving skills. Heavy loaders and semi-trailers went through their paces on the 2-hectare skid pan, practising their braking and manoeuvring techniques.
We would like it to become a regular event. With the assistance of the people that have been involved in this course, we think that we can structure it so that it is going to be a valuable experience for anyone in the industry.
The event is held in conjunction with the Armidale Autumn Festival and may be made into an annual exercise. 24 drivers join the course, all picking up vital information and skills.
You learn to better your skills at driving and also to improve on your technique, and I think it just makes you a better driver.
Umpires at school today. Organisers could have hoped for a better showing though. Only 16 took advantage of the seminar put on by the National Sports Clinic. Experts Carol Walk and Carol Morris imparting their wisdom. All aspects of umpiring were covered and it was well timed. Out on the AstroTurf at Lower Fisher Park, a junior coaching clinic. Youngsters aged between 11 and 17 getting a chance to hone their skills. And this afternoon they became guinea pigs for the umpires, who got the chance to put their newfound knowledge to the test. The venue, the International Hockey Centre at Broadmeadow. 8:30 this morning, 140 youngsters turned out, sticks in hand, all set for a hockey education. The camp coordinated by former Australian women's captain Robin Leggett, with a little help from leading New South Wales and Newcastle coaches. For the students, an ideal opportunity to hone their skills. They'll be out again tomorrow as well, the Hunters Hockey Nursery alive and well. Moving on to something completely different. Rugby union at Glen Innes. The Northern Province Carnival. 3 sides doing battle: New England, Far North Coast and Mid North Coast. Today's first match between the Inlanders and Mid North Coast. A high-scoring affair. 60 points racked up in all. Unfortunately for the Coastal boys, New England scored 57 of them. The New England players had a little trouble getting out of their own way at times, but had no problems finding the try line. The carnival continues tomorrow, with today's victors taking on Far North Coast in what organisers hope will be a tighter match. From this carnival, a squad will be picked to represent Northern Province at Ballina in a fortnight's time.
An Australian trifecta in the women's slalom qualifying with the first 4 through to the final. Only Andrea Gay-Ton of Mexico throwing down the gauntlet to the Aussies. But even she will be hard-pressed to tip out the locals. Victorian Jodie Skipper a little bit disappointed with her run, although she qualified in 3rd spot. Surprise packet Lynn Neville filled the 2nd qualifying berth, making 21 boys. But Lynn will need to be at her best tomorrow to hold the others at bay. The top qualifier was Tony Neville, and not even damaged tendons in a forearm could hold the Queenslander back, and Tony negotiated 22.25 boys to set the pace for the slalom final. Sweden's Mike Sjölander, the current joint world slalom record holder, was in brilliant form to qualify in the top spot for the men's slalom. Sjölander cleared 38 1/4 boys to edge out Australia's Bruce Neville, whose super style cut the river to pieces, and he is one of a few that can seriously mount a challenge to Sjölander. Others to qualify for the men's final are Neil Ritchie of Victoria, Craig Llewellyn of Canada, Mick Neville of Queensland and Scott Ellis of the United States. But joy for the veteran of the field, Bruce Coburn of Newcastle. A world champion way back in 1977, Bruce was superb in the slalom, qualifying in 5th position for the final. A new event at Oz Ski is the tricks, and fans warm to the exotic skills of the skiers, Craig Llewellyn finishing 410 points in front of Mick Neville, with cousin Bruce a further 580 points in arrears. Finals begin from 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
The announcement by the University of New England Sports Union that they plan to construct an artificial surface has been welcomed by local hockey enthusiasts. The $500,000 project will be funded by the University Union and corporate sponsorship. The local hockey association doesn't have to contribute any capital initially, but has promised to help cover the cost by paying to use the field. The development is expected to be built by the end of the year, and it should see a growth in interest in the sport.
Bring more people into Armidale to play hockey, and develop the skills, and allow Armidale to host State League matches where at the present we're in State League, but State League has to be held on artificial surfaces, which means we have to travel to Tamworth or travel to Sydney. Will be able to represent their state, be able to represent their country, whereas in previous times we've been held back because Tamworth is able to do that, but we haven't.
Obviously.
The Police Association has been vocal in its opposition to the state government's plan to introduce volunteer police. Association President Tony Day told a union meeting in Newcastle that the department planned to trial volunteer policing in Dubbo, Ermington outside Sydney and Wollongong. He says there's every reason to believe Newcastle is the fourth as yet unnamed location.
We see a lot of problems with it. We've had people overseas looking at it in both England and North America and Canada, and we're seeing the failures and the failings that are happening with it in these places.
Volunteer policing is already on shaky ground, with a concession by Police Minister Ted Pickering that if the police and community oppose the plan, it will be scrapped without hesitation. Tony Day says the minister should already have got the message.
At this stage, I've been to meetings all over the state of New South Wales, and I'm yet to find a policeman who is interested in volunteer policing.
The association has no objection to a watered-down proposal using community members to staff information stands, but attempts to put volunteers in police stations will be opposed not only by the police, but also by members of the Public Service Association already employed in those duties. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
With the Barcelona Games just 3 months away, few if any of the riders at Dungog are guaranteed a place in the Australian team. Not even 7-time state eventing rider of the year, Heath Ryan of Lochinvar. He's been shortlisted for the 5-member squad. Blasting onto the scene this season is Malcolm Matum from Raymond Terrace on Bonza Joe, a failed racehorse which was bound for the knackery until Malcolm nurtured him to 1991 Horse of the Year. John Cooper will also be out to turn the selectors' heads at the final Olympic trials at Lochinvar in 2 weeks' time.
That's where they have to perform.
Almost 150 riders and their mounts competed over a slippery 3-kilometre cross-country course at the Tabble Creek property.
It makes the competitor just think a little more and just take a little more care.
The Navy side was drawn from players based in Sydney. They made the trip to Moree after one of them, a former Moree resident, suggested and organised the match. The team provided the trophies.
It's just like an end-of-year wind-up, and some of the remote places in Australia are more interesting rather than just playing in places we've already been.
The Navy side notched up an impressive 223 from their 50 overs with a loss of just 7 wickets. But it wasn't enough to win them the game. Moree scored 9 for 229 off 46 overs to clinch the match. Michael Connolly was awarded the Man of the Match award after scoring 80.
Narrabri Lake, where these fishing enthusiasts were preparing for a hard day's work. But instead of reeling in their catch, they spent the time putting fish back into the lake.
We're trying to give the lake a bit of a kick along. Everyone's been up and we decided we'd help them. So we dumped some in there. Hopefully they're going to grow to massive sizes.
25,000 golden perch were released into the lake and Namoy River. Fishing is a popular pastime in the area, and this is one way enthusiasts can ensure their sport won't die out. The Narrabri Amateur Fishing Club raised $5,000 to buy the fingerlings. They're in the process of selling raffle tickets for their next restocking program. That should net $10,000. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The State ALP has put it in writing that the rail line is to be retained to Newcastle. Despite this, 4 of Newcastle City Council's Labor aldermen, including Lord Mayor John McNaughton, have supported cutting the rail link at the Civic.
They certainly have voted against party policy.
To try to ensure the alderman's vote isn't the end of the line, Mr Gaudry and other party members are tonight meeting with Peter Barrick from the Trades Hall Council. Although the talks are being held behind closed doors, it's understood Trades Hall will be asked to consider convening a public meeting and imposing bans against lifting the rails from the Civic to Newcastle. Mr Barrick says even though his organisation opposes cutting the line, he can give no commitments tonight to support any bans. The Trades Hall Council is on the Honeysuckle Advisory Panel, which is looking at ending the line here at the Civic as part of the massive waterfront development. Mr Barrick says the panel's stance on the issue doesn't affect the Trades Hall's opposition to cutting the line.
A particular issue within the Honeysuckle Advisory Board, we agree to disagree. I think we're moving into another phase now where other forces, such as the ALP, wish to make their opposition known more vigorously, and as a consequence of that have approached the Trades Hall Council for support.
The possibility of organising a public meeting and bans will be raised at next week's Trades Hall Council meeting. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It was unusually quiet on Newcastle Harbour for a couple of hours today, while the rank and file attended a stop work meeting where they agreed to support the ACTU's policy on waterfront reform. About 20 unions cover the workers at New South Wales' 3 major ports, Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong. Under the new proposal, all work would be done by just one maritime union for blue-collar workers. The existing awards are to be amalgamated into one award, and negotiations about work conditions carried out by one body, known as the Single Bargaining Unit. While Newcastle unions today agreed to these reforms, they expressed concern about the possibility that more workers will be made redundant. They also opposed private contractors taking over any of their traditional work.
We're sending a clear signal to the Maritime Services Board that we want the resources and the support from them as an employer to ensure that the Maritime Services Board doesn't become some memory in people's minds.
Yesterday, SRA Clerk of Works Jeffrey Elms told the Commission he'd never received gifts from contractors. Today, the issue of car hire. In July 1990, Elms spent several days in Sydney. He told Assistant Commissioner Ronald Sackville QC, "I hired a BMW, I organised it." But today the Commission was given car rental documents which show that the BMW was hired and paid for by a graft and earth moving contractor by the name of Charlie Fuller. Crucial evidence from this man, Grafton Avis representative Craig Johnson. He told the hearing he and Fuller are good friends and that the contractor told him he was hiring the car for Mr Elms. This afternoon, Counsel Carolyn Davenport asked Elms if he had lied to the Commission. He replied, "Yes, I did." She asked, "Who are you protecting?" Elms said, "Myself." The hearing continues. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
More than 70 residents, Aboriginal and council representatives attended the meeting, chaired by Aboriginal Hostels Limited, a federally funded Aboriginal company. Their mission, to convince locals the home is a plausible project and nothing to be concerned about. So now the meeting continues behind closed doors. The media are asked to leave in case discussions became heated, even emotional. In the likelihood of such scenes erupting, it was felt the media's presence may cause things to get misconstrued. The plan is to build a home similar to these, to accommodate 16 Aboriginal males aged between 14 and 18, plus 2 full-time house parents. It's proposed for this 25-hectare site, some 20 kilometres south of Cessnock. It has an educational focus, with youths gaining trade and lifestyle skills both on the site and in nearby schools and technical colleges. For the last 4 years, Aboriginal hostels have looked at 32 sites. They say Cessnock is their last hope. They believe it is also the last chance for youths having trouble integrating into mainstream society, education and work environments.
If they don't have that support in the program there, then they will not go there and they will end up perhaps the derelicts around the town.
After more than 2 hours, the meeting finished. Initial impressions proving favourable. Despite this, there are still a few reservations.
The impact of sewerage is still a concern, and the availability or not of water is also a big concern.
Edna Barrelitz expects these technicalities ironed out within a week, but the umpire's decision rests with council.
It'll come to council either next week or 3 weeks hence for determination.
And are you happy with what they've presented, the concept they've put forward?
I'm feeling comfortable.
The Toronto Workers' Club operations manager was making a routine morning trip to the bank. As he was trying to start his car, another vehicle pulled up alongside.
A man wearing the balaclava jumped out of the vehicle and produced a sawn-off weapon to the employee.
He was thrown face first into a stolen van. His hands were bound, a bag placed over his head. The bandits then drove 5 kilometres into bushland near Awaba. A briefcase believed to be carrying more than $6,000 was stolen, including the employee's wallet. Rings on his fingers were ripped off. The bandits then drove off in another vehicle. Meanwhile, their victim ran through bushland to a house to call for help.
Oh, very shaken he was, yeah, very shaken. He said that the gun was stuck to his head several times and that they'd threatened to cut off his finger if he didn't give him his rings.
Later, Toronto detectives took the operations manager back to the scene. Tonight, police say they have few leads, with no descriptions of the attackers or the getaway vehicle. They believe the thieves had probably been planning the attack for some time, studying the club's routine. Toronto Workers' Club's officials are grateful no one was seriously hurt in the robbery, but as of midday today, they've employed a professional security firm to make the regular run to the bank. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
At Lake Macquarie City Council chambers today, the first of 3 forums aimed at identifying those facilities suitable for pre-Olympic tournaments and training. The Department of Sport and Recreation, the Hunter Academy of Sport and the Hunter Regional Association of Councils are at the forefront of supplying Sydney with ammunition to help their Sydney 2000 bid.
I think because the major thrust is that everything will be held in Sydney, is that that's probably what will happen. There's nothing to stop us perhaps going for, with our soccer facilities, hockey facilities. We have the surface there at the Newcastle International Centre that's going to be used in Barcelona this year. So I think we bid to try and get pools and so forth up here of events.
But paramount to providing a top-class submission for the Sydney Committee is the harnessing of the enthusiasm already evident.
I think that we just have to stay on track. Our main purpose is to promote the Hunter Valley at this time. Once we win the bid, that's when we can start to get into it a lot bigger.
And what appears to be a relatively simple exercise of providing a list of suitable venues, such as equestrian, hockey, tennis and soccer to name a few, shouldn't get bogged down by bureaucracy, according to many.
I hope we don't get too involved with red tape and those things that always seem to hold up the necessary positive outlook that I'm sure most people in the regiment have.
For one hard-working administrator today, some reward for the long hours associated with helping a sport. Cheryl Ralston has given 15 years to roller skating and has been awarded the New South Wales Sports Administrator of the Year. From Cahaiba, Cheryl is responsible for artistic, speed and roller hockey in the state, a labour of love for the Executive Director.
Administrators are the backbone of any sport, aren't they?
They are. They keep the sport together. They're the communication line, information out to all the clubs and look after the members. And yes, they're focal point.
Do you think they're recognised enough?
No.
The Chain Valley Bay project was the subject of a key address at the ongoing Institute of Engineers conference in Newcastle. David Yee worked with GHD Engineering on the first of 3 stages to reclaim the land. More than 40 properties were affected by land subsidence of almost 1 metre caused by Elcom mining beneath the neighbourhood. His address was one of 8 given by Australia's top young engineers competing for prize money in the National Public Presentation Competition. The Chain Valley Bay project began in 1987 and involved raising roads, houses and public facilities a safe distance above the lake, as well as ongoing landscaping.
I think it's been a valuable experience for the engineers involved and also a learning experience, I think, for the Mine Subsidence Board in how to deal with subsidence of this nature on future projects.
The completion of the $5.5 million operation has created a new chapter for Australia's engineers. A spokesman for the Mine Subsidence Board says that although the work is now completed, monthly meetings will continue with residents and local councils to ensure there are no further complaints. Residents also have recourse to the Land and Environment Court. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
The program had its beginnings late last year, but has received a boost with the donation of $10,000 worth of testing equipment to Moree's 2 high schools by the department and local businesses. Despite being in a cotton-growing area, it appears the phosphate and nitrate levels in the Mihai River, where Moree draws its water, are quite good.
Well, we found that our river's pretty healthy, actually. We've been looking around, and it seems that compared to other areas that we have a pretty healthy environment around us.
Water Resources is impressed with the reaction to the scheme by the schools and the students and hopes to expand Streamwatch, funds permitting.
We'd like to, in the future, extend that out and broaden it to cover places such as Narrabri, Wee Waa and Inverell, and ultimately to cover the whole of the northwest region.
Apart from the benefits to the community at large, the educational benefits are obvious in the fields of geography, chemistry and especially environmental science.
We believe it adds quite a bit in terms of their academic performance, particularly in the chemistry area and in geography and general water quality issues and land management issues which are going to flow out of all this.
It's really helpful to have a program like Stream Watch, which helps us to understand what we're doing for the environment, how the environment is working by itself, and how we can help to keep our environment clean and to have a healthy place to drink and to play.
The Yurundiali Corporation could be considered as the most successful Aboriginal arts skills training project in the state. Members of the co-op are dedicated to developing a financially viable business selling fine art design and textiles to help combat the 75% unemployment rate among Aborigines.
Support ourselves and bring people into the town.
Textile and garment manufacturing is the group's main product and it's making a big impression on the market. Originally started with a federal grant, the group is now self-sufficient and has opened its own retail shop to meet public demand. The Yurundiali team consists of 12 artists, 3 seamstresses, a coordinator and a gardener. They stage displays and fashion parades. The next exhibition will be in Gosford in 3 weeks' time. Well-known artist Ken Doan has plans to visit the group in the hope of establishing a joint exhibition.
The loss of the Cessna 210 on August 9, 1981 was a tragic episode in the Hunters' history. 5 men, including 2 senior police officers, were posted missing, presumed dead, after the aircraft disappeared in the Barrington Tops. A series of fruitless searches followed, which only served to deepen the mystery and fuel an endless string of rumours. Police Rescue Officer Constable Brian Plews took part in 6 searches.
The searches I've been there just haven't found anything. All we've found has been very thick and dense bush.
The latest search will include about 50 bushwalkers, volunteer rescue members and a team from HMAS Albatross at Nowra. They'll be following a computer-generated flight path which takes into account weather conditions on the day of the flight, eyewitness reports and the results of previous searches. It suggests that the most likely crash site is somewhere in the Wangat Valley near Dungog. Brian Plews won't be on this search, but he wishes the team the very best of luck. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
It was January 19 and a crew of lifesavers from Newcastle were trying to retrieve the body of a young boy who had disappeared off the beach 3 days earlier. In the wild conditions, the crew lost control and their rubber ducky was overturned. The lifesavers were rescued by the police launch, but the ducky was wrecked as it washed against the cliff face. Today, that tragedy was put behind the club with the launching of a new craft. BHP sponsored the last rubber ducky and again came up with the $10,000 needed for the new one. The lifesavers have been using an older craft, but the latest vessel brings the club up to full strength. Its first job patrolling the beach with the trials in Surfest.